making movies for people to watch at home by themselves, I don't think has nearly the impact of getting a group together to have a communal experience.
This is Just Being Intentional with Thomas Harris. My name is Thomas Harris. I'm your host. We thank you for being with us. Welcome to the show. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us, and we will greatly appreciate it. My guest for the show is a filmmaker. He's a husband, a father, a fellow believer, and a friend. He is also the Chief Creative Officer at Kingdom Story Company. And if you see the background, we got some posters here. This is where we're actually recording today at Kingdom Story Company. Andy Erwin.
Dude, good to be with you, Thomas. You're persistent, man. You kept asking me, and my schedule kind of gets squirrely. But man, I appreciate your persistence in making this happen. Good to be with you today.
Man, I can't thank you enough for being here. When I decided to do this thing, this show, you were actually the first person I asked to come on to be a guest on the show.
That's awesome.
I greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for letting us use this space as well. This is a beautiful setup you guys have here, and I'm just honored to be here. Yeah, man.
It's an office with a lot of love. We make all of our films in this building, and from idea all the way to finishing it, and so it's a place of storytellers. So when you were talking about what you're doing, I was like, man, yeah, let's just come over to the studio. Let's have a conversation.
Sweet. So let's start from the beginning. What's the origin story of Andy Erwin?
Man, we're just a bunch of creative delinquents. When we started, this whole thing has been just kind of a hobby as kids that grew out of control. I never thought that this would be a career. It was just, my dad was in television growing up. He was a news anchor in Dallas, and then we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and he took a news director's job there. And so, we kind of grew up behind the scenes. We were studio rats. And I remember when I was like 4 years old, sitting off to the side of the set while my dad did the news. Mm-hmm. And so, we grew up around it. And then my dad got into radio, was a radio host for a while. And then he had this little side cable access TV show while he did radio. And so when I was 15, my brother was 12, they needed help at the station. And we just said, that sounds like fun. So I think we broke a lot of child labor laws, and we got paid like $10 a day. And then if we ran camera behind the scenes, then we got to use the equipment from midnight till 4 a.m. Wow. And so we would kind of go lock ourselves in the studio at night. We were homeschooled, so it kind of gave us a chance to set our own hours. And it just became something we fell in love with. We just kind of figure out how to tell stories, how to edit, and do our thing. And so when I went off to college, there was a small Christian college I went to in upstate New York, and they found out that I had some experience with doing, film type stuff. And they said, could you make some short films for the kids? And they had this camp, this summer camp that they'd have during the summer on this 90-acre island in upstate New York. And 500 kids a week would come to this camp. And it gave us a chance to test out these short films and stuff. And I remember the first one that we did was like this Knights of the Round Table epic. It was like Lord of the Rings, we thought. And shot it on little high-8 cameras, and and it ended like live on stage with pyrotechnics, and it was like this epic thing. And I remember awesome. 500 kids in this big meeting room, and we're watching it, and it gets to the end, and it's crickets. There's no sound at all. Wow. And one kid on the front row, like this 12-year-old kid's like, "Is that it?" So to this day, I can't watch a film that's one of our films that's screening in a theater, because I'm convinced that this guy's going to show back up as a 45-year-old man, be like, "Is that it?" So, but it really it was our testing ground. We got to try things and learn how to motivate an audience. And so my brother came home, and started this production company just at home in the bedroom of our house. And then on the weekends, we worked for ESPN as cameraman. He got a job as a cameraman for ESPN, and I was like, that's way cooler than what I'm doing. So I dropped out of school, came home, and we started this company. And my dad, always said, whatever you commit 20 years of your life to, you could be successful at. And so we jumped into it. I was 21, and we got into everything from music videos to then eventually trying our hand at feature films. And our breakout hit was I Can Only Imagine, which was 20 years, almost to the day, of us starting the company. And so God's just kind of just allowed us to tell stories for a living.
Wow. So your brother started Kingdom Story Company?
Well, it started, it wasn't Kingdom. We started Kingdom together. It started as a little company called HE Productions. My dad, Hank Erwin, and my dad got a loan for the equipment, and he had an agreement with us if we would work hard to pay off the equipment. When we paid it off, he would sign the company over to me and my brother. So John hadn't quite started it. We came and started it together, and but he had planned it out, and so we started that. That became, when we paid it off, that became Erwin Brothers. And then Erwin Brothers had a couple of different variations of it over the years. And then after I Can Only Imagine, that's where we were like, God had just kind of really, Imagine was on the back of, a precarious moment in our career where like this was either going to be a hobby and we were going to quit, or it was going to become a career. And, we had done several movies before that, a lot of music videos, but Imagine was the one we kind of went all in on. And when that worked, this little $7 million film, it did almost $90 million in the box office. We went to Lionsgate. They wanted to start like a long-term deal with us. And so we had always dreamed of having a label and something. And so our producing partner, Kevin Downs, and us had all dreamed of having a place where we could. And so there was a guy named Tony Young that was like, came to us with this idea of what can we do together that none of us can do apart from each other. Mm-hmm. And so we stepped in and said, like, let's start like a place where we can fuel other filmmakers' visions. So we started Kingdom Story Company. Tyler Perry was leaving Lionsgate, and we're like, we want Tyler Perry's deal. And so we went and hired his attorney. It's a guy named Matt Johnson. Didn't know if that was good or bad, but he negotiated a deal we shouldn't have ever had. We came to find out later that the rest of his client list was like LeBron James, Oprah Winfrey, and the Obamas. So it's like, so he had a power list, and I guess he either felt sorry for us or believed in what we were creating. But we have our deal there at Lionsgate. We've been there for 6 years. We just re-upped for another 3. And man, it's been a great place for us to make movies.
Sweet. What would you have to say to that heckler from back in the day today?
First of all, he was right. He was right. I think, I think every creative or every person that achieves something has to have a villain in the story. Mm-hmm. That's that splinter in your mind that drives you towards excellence. I watched the documentary Last Dance, and I've watched it a couple of times, and Michael Jordan was really good at always inventing these villains and these scenarios in his head. Right. So I think that kid was a gift because, number one, it motivated us to get better. We kind of adopted a policy that quality is something you always chase. It's not something you ever catch. Mm-hmm. You just want to get a little bit better each time. Yeah. And then secondly, we learned to value that person in the front row. Like, who is the person that's consuming your product? Why are they buying a ticket for it? Why do they care? And what gives them an experience that's worth their price of admission? So we serve, and I think a lot of times, especially as filmmakers, but it goes for writers, it goes for musicians. A lot of times it's easy to become indulgent and be like, no, this is my self-expression. This is what I want to say. And, the problem with that is they get into a rut where it's like they're not valuing the audience. Right. And so I think for us, we just began to be like, no, we serve the audience, and what do they want to consume? And so I think if I were to go back to that 12-year-old kid, if he showed up as like a grumpy old man, I'd be like, man, thank you you for helping us to figure out what to value. And I think we've grown a lot in that.
Yeah, it's you say valuing the audience. It's customer service.
Yes,
basically, essentially.
We're in a service industry. Absolutely.
Right. You know, I did 15 years of customer service with Trader Joe's, and my focus was always looking at presentation through the lens of the audience, the customers.
Yep.
You know, it's like if people see a beautiful production or display, they're more likely to buy from that place because it just looks enticing to them. So it's the same thing with movies.
Absolutely.
How fun is it to be in this kind of job career with your brother? I remember growing up with my brother, one of my brothers, as kids, we made our own comic books.
Yeah.
We just took plain sheets of white paper and fold them in half. We staple the sides, and we just drew pictures and had captions, and it was fun. I wish I had those still today. Who knows where they are, but just a joy to be involved in something with your brother, to share those experiences. So you developed a passion for filmmaking. Was there any particular filmmakers that inspired you early on?
Man, I think as any filmmaker, for me, it all goes back to all things Spielberg. I mean, I think Spielberg is just he's a master, and I think there's a couple of different scenarios, and I think with the brother thing, I'm grateful, that my brother played a big part in my career. We motivated each other, and John has the ambition and drive that I don't naturally have, and so he pushed things for years, and so it's been a great ride. I think we kind of got to a place in our careers where we wanted to pursue different things, and so John's really developing this streaming idea that he's doing with Amazon with the Wonder Project, and we kind of got to a place where it's like, just because we've come up together doesn't mean we have to be handcuffed to each other. Mm-hmm. And he felt this drive to kind of create new things. And John always loves to be, kind of on the bleeding edge. And I like to sustain things. And I don't think either one's right or wrong. But we learned that as we were pulling different directions, there is this point as creative partners where you come to a place where I think we've earned the right to kind of chase our things. So John's off in Greece shooting stuff for his thing, and we're developing a bunch of stuff feature-wise here with Lionsgate, and there's things we're partnering on that we're projects that we'll co-produce on at points. But I'm grateful for the drive that he brought for a number of years. I think for us as filmmakers, we looked at there was a group of filmmakers that Spielberg was a part of. That Francis Ford Coppola back in the day had this kind of brat pack of filmmakers that all worked for him, and so they started out together, and then they became just kind of this loose grouping of allies. And I think if you go look at Zoetrope and all those guys back in the day, it was fascinating, this rebel unit that really revolutionized film, and they did it through collaboration, they did it through friction with respect. But they worked for Francis. So Francis had, he was working on Godfather and doing all that. But that group of guys, it was George Lucas, it was Spielberg, it was Martin Scorsese, it was Brian De Palma before he did Scarface. There was a bunch of them. And they would all sit around and just talk about film. And the way that they motivated each other, and out of that, during a time where film had become very indulgent, like the film industry in the 70s had become very indulgent. And out of that group, went on to do some of the greatest cinema, over the next 25 years. And so, but they all kind of started together, Spielberg was working on Jaws. George Lucas had just done American Graffiti. He worked as an assistant editor on Godfather, and then, George started working on Star Wars. And so he brought Star Wars in to show it to the guys, and they screened it for all these guys. Spielberg was the only one that saw that it was going to be a hit movie. And Spielberg's like, oh, that's going to be a hit. Nobody else understood it. It was rough. The edit was rough. It was slow. And it was Brian De Palma that in the midst of all that, stood up at dinner, and he's like, George, I don't know what the heck I just watched. It doesn't make any sense. It's like this spaghetti western in space, and there's a talking robot, and it does. Who are all these people, and why should I care? And so in the midst of that, he's like, it should be like the old spaghetti westerns where you start with the text at the front of the movie that says these are all who the people are and why we should care about them. And then George is like, we could do that. So the famous scrolling text at the beginning of the Star Wars movies came from Brian De Palma of Scarface.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And so, it was this group of guys. So I think there's this idea of collaboration, of friction with respect. And that's kind of what we tried to emulate at Kingdom. And so I think it goes back to that group of guys that I think were the rebel unit of their day.
Wow. That's awesome. New information for our audience. If you are not a movie buff, I mean, I consider myself a movie buff. I love film. I love the art of storytelling. The whole production is, what I'm a big fan of. Speaking of production and projects, you guys do some pretty good stuff.
Thanks, man.
Notable projects like the one you mentioned first, the big one was I Can Only Imagine. You guys have done Woodlawn, American Underdog, Jesus Revolution, Ordinary Angels, and most recently Unsung Hero, which is doing quite well in the box office.
Yep.
Took the family to see that, and it was a huge hit. And I was pleasantly surprised, not discounting your talents,
right.
But it was way better than I thought it was going to be.
It's
so
good. It's good.
Pleasant surprise, and it really shows that you guys are really into your craft, and you want to produce quality to present to the audience. So that just solidifies what you said about customer appreciation.
Yep.
What would be some of those challenges that you face in some of these productions? Behind the scenes.
Oh man, making movies is agonizing at points, and it's never easy. No movie wants to get made. It's really hard to make a really good film. Mm-hmm. But what we found was it's actually almost as hard to make a bad film. It's difficult to make a film, period. So why not push it a little bit harder to try to get it as close to great as you can?
Yeah.
And so we really, really sweat the process, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, being on the hot seat as a filmmaker, whether it's, with what they did in the early days at Pixar with Ed Catmull and John Lasseter, or what they did back in the day with Francis Ford Coppola and his group of misfit rebels. The idea of pushing for greatness is really, really hard. But I think we've got a track record, and it was funny. One of the reviews for Ordinary Angels that I liked, as they said, a quality reviewed faith film from Kingdom. What a shock! But let's face it, they've become the A24 of faith films, and that kind of made me smile. And I was like, okay, so to have a movie like Ordinary Angels that John Gunn directed, and it be to be certified fresh, to be the highest rated thing we've ever had with critics. American Underdog, very similar. We've got a track record of the majority of our films since I Can Only Imagine have been fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think the thing that I have pride in is when we stepped into the market, the idea of faith film, we got laughed at a lot. All of us did. We had to learn how to really do the craft that none of us really understood when we stepped into it. And to invade a weak market where there was not much expected of us, it was hard to get really good actors in front of the camera. Or not good. We had good actors, but get well-known actors, like name actors.
Yeah.
Because nobody really take a chance on us. So we studied other genres that had done it really well, and the genre that we landed on that we learned from the most was horror films. Back in the day, horror films, similar to like superhero films back in the day. In the early days of both of those, were considered like the wasteland. It was like the cheese. It was the, you're going to be in a cheesy slasher film or a cheesy superhero film. And they were kind of a joke, and they were kind of where good actors went to die. But then there was individuals that stepped into that market and said, it's a weak market. What if we raise the bar? So you had Jason Blum with Blumhouse. Jason stepped into it and was like, well, if we keep the budgets moderate and we push the quality better and we serve these horror fans with a really good product, as long as you service that, there's a chance every now and then you can do a universal overlay and have something to say, and you have a big breakout moment. So he did these films that were really interesting from that standpoint, and that's where you get a movie like Get Out, little $4 million film that he took a chance on a comedy writer-director in Jordan Peele. They shot it in Alabama, right down the road from where we shot I Still Believe, and this tiny little micro-budget film had this universal overlay of a civil rights kind of social justice kind of message,
right?
But it delivered everything that you want out of a scary movie, and all of a sudden it blows up. And then Quiet Place comes along and with Paramount and kind of steals that same formula and did the same thing. It was an alien movie, but it was really about a dad trying to keep his kids safe in an unsafe world. And so those films really kind of elevated what you expected out of a thriller. And as a result, they stopped being cheesy movies. We're like, well, why can't we do that in faith? You know, why can't we take what people expect the experience to be and raise the bar and earn the right to be heard and stop having this entitled chip on our shoulder as Christians of saying we deserve people to support our films just because of the message. Like, no, it needs to be entertaining. It needs to be worth the price of admission. And so the exciting thing to see is we've got 4 films that have 2 of them have come out, 2 more coming out this year with Lionsgate. I didn't direct any of them. I produced on them, and the quality is every bit as high, if not higher. And I think the reason why the fingerprints stay the same is there's a creative group of us that we push and refine and refine and refine to the point of it becoming uncomfortable at points to try to make it as close to great as we can get each time.
Yeah.
And so to have Unsung Hero directed by my buddy Joel Smallbone, who's a musician, and he's moved into filmmaking, and it's new for him to play his father in the film and co-direct it with Richie Ramsey, and the quality to be fantastic. I'm really proud of that. And so it's been exciting to see.
It was amazing. You and I have had conversations about the difficulty of seeing such poor quality that makes it and makes money.
Sure.
Whether it be writing or directing, the whole production is just plain and simple. It sucks.
Yeah.
And as a fan of film, like I am, like you are, to see some of those things actually make it and make money, that's got to be extremely frustrating, you know. But I want to segue, since you brought it up, talking about these faith-based projects. From your perspective, why do you think it's so difficult for these faith-based films to gain success?
You know, the challenges are, I mean, there's so many. The challenges for it is multifaceted. Since COVID, it's become more and more difficult to figure out how to create an event. People got comfortable watching things at home. And a lot of times, you know, what they say is, oh, I'll just wait till it comes out on home video and I'll buy a copy of it on, you know, iTunes or an Apple TV and watch it then. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, you know, you significantly impact the amount of product that's going to get made. And so for us as a filmmaker, we have to create an event that's a reason for people to get out in theaters. So, I mean, you look at like Jesus Revolution, that was a great moment for us. And my brother and Brent McCorkle directed that film. We were able to create an event around it. And part of that was God, of just what was going on with Asbury and all that, the revival that broke out there that we had nothing to do with. You know, it was a God thing. But it created a communal event where everybody wanted to get out in the theater for the same weekend. So to make a movie work, you've got to get a minimum of 1 million people out to the movie theater in a weekend. And you look at any other Christian event that's able to get 1 million people out of their houses.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, you look at that being, you know, the combined total of, you know, every Christian concert for a whole year in one weekend. That's a lot. So you have to create an event. You know, the thing that we're grateful for is to have a support of a studio that really believes in our audience. So Lionsgate has doubled and tripled down on, we believe in this audience, and they're spending money on it. and that's a big deal. And then secondly, we're just grateful to have a bunch of friends that have social impact to where we can really spark grassroots movement. So when it came to like Unsung Hero, we got to the opening week and we're like, guys, you know, we don't have a big name actor to get on all the Tonight Show and all that. We've got to really spark a movement. And so, you know, I was grateful to have, it was me and Joel Smallbone and Candace Cameron. We all got together on a text thread and be like, everybody open up their Rolodex. And we've got to go to all of our friends and ask for support. And it turned into almost a game where, you know, where we just, everybody was saying yes. And it's super exciting. We tallied up that week how many of our friends posted for us and all their social followers. And we tallied up the amount of people that posted, and it was 160 million followers. And, nice. and that's what sparked that, in combination with a lot of the efforts that had been done. It sparked a moment that weekend, and that's what leads to a hit movie. And so those are the challenges of getting noticed. The thing that isn't as challenging that I'm grateful for is we're for the first time attracting really big name talent to this space. We've got Best Christmas Pageant Ever that Dallas Jenkins from The Chosen directed, and we were on a call last night at 10:30 at night going through notes on that, and it's got, you know, Lauren Graham in it and Judy Greer, and it's a really great film that comes out in November. And you know, and it's just exciting to see the talent that's coming to the table, that's available, that makes these big movies work. And so, and Lionsgate and others are starting now to spend more and more money on bigger products. So we've got some mainstream films that are in the pipeline that I think are going to be really big.
Yeah, that's awesome. Some of those names that you see on the screen, you know, when your movie's rolling, it's like, wow, how did they get those guys? How did you get a Hilary Swank? You got the guy to play Reacher in the
Alan
TV
Richardson.
show. You know, it's like,
who's literally the biggest dude on the planet. Yeah,
I'm sure he's bigger than life if you see him in person.
He's huge.
Yeah. So let's transition into balancing roles.
Sure.
The life of a filmmaker is a very busy and rigorous lifestyle.
Right.
But you are a husband and a father,
right,
to 3 kids, and being a writer, a director, producer, you know, chief creative officer at Kingdom Story. Like, how do you successfully or attempt to become successful in balancing the life of a family man and then a filmmaker?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you do it really well. I've watched it with your kids, you know, particularly just with your daughters. I've watched just, you know, how present and safe they feel. And I think that's the sign of a really strong dad in the home. For me, I struggled with it for a long time because I tried to make everybody happy. And I thought my job was to make everybody happy. And I constantly resented my role. And I always felt like I was failing. And there's a man at Lionsgate named Jason Constantine, and he was in charge of acquisitions for a long time, and one of the higher ups in the company, and was one of the people responsible for recruiting us to Lionsgate. But he's a believer, and a strong believer, and you know, a really strong dad. And I've learned more from him about being a father than I have from being a filmmaker. And Constantine would constantly call me, and still to this day calls me. It says, "Hey, how are you doing as a dad? You know, how are your kids?" And I asked him, I remember we went to CinemaCon one year right after I Can Only Imagine. And CinemaCon they have in Vegas. And so Mandy went with me, and we were at this table of a bunch of people from Lionsgate. And we went out to dinner at it was a sushi place. It was Nobu, and so it was a big, expensive sushi place. But I remember I was sitting by Jason, and he asked me some of those questions about being a dad. And I finally turned to him. I was like, "Jason, how do you find balance in this job as a filmmaker and as a dad?" And he looked at me, and he didn't blink. He's like, "You don't. It was a very unbalanced job. So if you're looking for balance, this isn't the job. What you will find is seasons." I was like, "Huh." He's like, "There's seasons where your life is going to be crazy because you got to go make a movie. It's the same thing as being in the military. Well, not same. It's a lesser. It's a lot harder for being military. But being deployed in military, you're gone for a season. There's nothing you can do about it. Like, it's your job. but there's seasons where you're home. And he said, what you find is a lot of guys get so addicted to the adrenaline of being, as a filmmaker deployed on a film, that when they get home, they try to find something to always keep them busy, so they're never present at home. He's like, don't miss your seasons at home. When you're at home, be present, invest in your kids, see them as the priority.
Wow.
So it really gave me permission that there's times where my job is really busy. And when I go to do my job, I work my tail off and I do my job to the best of my ability. I'm fully present doing my job. But then I look for moments to be present with my kids, finding ways to do that while I'm doing that. And then when I get home, I'm home. And finding ways to invest in them where they feel seen, they feel safe, they feel the priority, they feel important. My wife, Mandy, she is the rock of our family. I feel like she's the heart. She absolutely gives me strength, and we're partners in that. And so we both feel fully committed. I've told her all along, like, if at any point this becomes detrimental to our family and you feel like we're not supposed to do this anymore, you let me know and I give up this job in a heartbeat. We'll do something else. But as long as we feel called to this, we've got to be strategic. And she's been my partner in that, in helping me to find that way to embrace seasons. And I've found that my job has gotten busier, especially as I stepped into being chief creative officer, because it's like, I'm not just responsible for one film at a time. I'm responsible for the creative on 5 films at a time. And so that's a lot. And so I at times I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. But my life has gotten busier, but I feel like I've been able to learn how to, my family to still feel chosen in that. And so it's not necessarily about being the victim of your schedule. It's about being intentional with your time. And that's what I've been learning. I'm still learning.
Funny thing about coming here to Tennessee from LA is that I was able to connect with people here that had connections with people back home. Jason's a great dude. Our families went to church together. I did a biblical counseling course with his wife.
Wow.
So that was pretty awesome.
I love that.
Like we said earlier, I've been trying to track you down for this. You were the first person I asked, and we finally made it happen today. And when we finally locked down a date, we were talking at the kids' Peter Pan play.
And your son made a great Captain Hook. He was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a proud dad moment for sure. But one thing I told you, just in relation to what you were just saying about the family dynamic, the balance, Mandy was sitting next to you as we were speaking about scheduling this, and I said, she is your priority.
Yeah.
I am not.
Yeah.
I said, it's going to happen. I have faith that it's going to happen when it's supposed to happen.
Right.
But I don't want you to neglect your wife and the free time that you have. I'm going to respect that's family time, because I know that you can get on the road and be gone for long periods of time. So I just wanted to let you know that I
appreciated that.
I fully support that, and I'm sure that your wife does as well. So with recent strikes that we had last year, the writer strike.
Yep.
Let's talk about some of the struggles with the industry. So what were some of those frustrations that you guys have had with the industry, the changing trends?
I think the bigger issue for us is, the industry as a whole. Yeah, I don't know how to solve any of those things. But for us, we're small enough to where we're able to kind of be a little bit more of a Delta force and kind of work around the system. And so I'm grateful for that. We kind of are naturally kind of inclined to be rebels, which I like. I think the biggest challenge is always society as a whole, because of where technology is. And I think it plays into the AI thing. I think it plays into the COVID of it all. I think that society as a whole is pulling more and more towards isolation.
Agreed.
People would rather have a relationship with their computer than a human being. And, that creates challenges for us as an industry, but I think it's even bigger challenges as a society. And I think trying to get people to get out of their houses and stay connected together. And I think it's a fundamental of what we believe as Christians. I mean, I think there's a reason why Paul said, don't forsake the assembling of together, as some have grown accustomed to do. Right. I think as a whole, the enemy loves to pull us into isolation. And the communal aspect of being connected to groups of individuals, I think, is a bedrock principle that is needed to have a strong faith. So what I do as a filmmaker is not critical to that equation, but it is a tool. It's a tool to get people out of their houses and to get people connected. Right. And I think you look at that as, storytelling has always been a form of that throughout human history, of sitting around a campfire and sharing stories. There's a communal aspect of being able to share that. And you look at how that translates today, that, a group of us get together and the first thing to talk about is like, what have you seen lately? And you share stories. We just add the extra element of being able to start those conversations about faith and about values and the things. But it's the challenge is, how do we get people out of their houses and get people to stop just being content to have a relationship by themselves with their computer? And AI is just another version of that, of just replacing, what is human with something that's artificial. And I think the artificial is easier because it doesn't require the other side of a relationship. It's messier to have a relationship with a human being.
Which also explains why we have self-checkout lines.
Exactly. It's just, we want as least interaction with people as possible.
Yeah.
Because we want, technology that serves us without asking for anything in return. But that's not a relationship.
Right.
That's transactional. And I think we've become more and more of a transactional society. I don't know how to change that.
Right.
I really feel like we learn to navigate around it.
Right.
But I think it's a spiritual condition that is just the nature of the treadmill we've chosen to be on. And I don't think you can really, I don't know how you pull that back. But that is the challenge, is people more and more have a relationship with people on social media, not people in real life. It keeps people at an arm's length distance.
And socially awkward.
And so, I think that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. And I think we were meant to have community. We were meant to have relationships with people. And so that's why we've been so committed, on the kingdom side, to the theatrical experience, because, making movies for people to watch at home by themselves, I don't think has nearly the impact of getting a group together to have a communal experience. There's a difference from listening to music in your car by yourself, which is fine. That's a part of it. There's a different experience when you can go to a praise and worship concert and experience it as a group. And I think it's a needed part of the human condition, is to connect with people.
COVID for a lot of people was a very devastating time.
Yeah.
For me, it was presented as an opportunity. One of the main motivations that I have for even doing this, what we're doing now, was coming out of COVID. In 2020, I was going through all the contacts in my phone and just calling people and checking on them because people were isolated, like you said.
Yep.
And getting people to realize that you are being thought of, and rather than just keeping it at, I wonder what so-and-so's up to. It was like, I pick up the phone and I call them or text them. And so many of those conversations were so timely for people because they needed somebody to reach out.
Yep.
So I was being intentional with that.
That's cool.
And it was an everyday thing. I was just like, in Los Angeles, you have horrible commutes. 17-mile commute was hour and a half.
It's ridiculous.
2 hours.
It's ridiculous.
So I used that as an opportunity to just get on the phone and start using that time to check in with people.
That's awesome.
And it, it was like I was driving a Tesla on self-drive.
That's cool.
But my vehicle was far from a Tesla. It was a hoopty-doopty. But the intentionality of that was rewarding for me because I was able to make an impact in people's lives.
That's cool.
Because some of those folks felt like they were forgotten about.
Yes.
Everybody was doing the same thing, isolating,
Yep.
sheltering in place. And I was like, no, this is not the way God designed us to be. We were created to be social creatures, and this is anti-social creatures. So, speaking of being intentional, what is it that you kind of touched on it already, but what is it you need to really do to be more intentional? Like, this is what I need to do, but you just got to make it happen. Yeah.
I mean, I think it goes back to the community idea. Is, as guys especially, we get so task oriented that it's about a checklist, and the thing that we're afraid of more than anything is somebody feeling like we don't know what we're doing. We want to be competent in people's eyes, and I think we protect that. And I think it naturally gears towards isolation. It naturally gears towards control, and it naturally gears towards being lone wolves. And I think I've learned from falling on my face enough times that what's required is being intentionally vulnerable and having a group of men that know me inside and out, that there is nothing hidden, seeking out individuals like that are safe. And I think what makes a safe individual like that is, I don't believe relationships are safe unless they go both ways. Like, if it's somebody that's always there to help you and you never help them and you don't know their stuff, that's not a safe relationship. That's a therapist. Which there's nothing wrong with therapists. I have a therapist, but it's a transactional relationship. But a community relationship is somebody that they know your stuff, you know their stuff. They're there to help you. You're there to help them. Common interest. And, it's hard to find individuals that have that same alignment. But, on that list, I'd say I have 10 of those people where they know me and I know them. And then I have maybe 4 of those people that are, an every week kind of thing. And I've got 1 or 2 that are like an everyday thing. And just intentionally, especially the busier life gets, the more you should be talking to those people. Because it's so easy. I meet too many guys, and I've potentially been one of those guys at points where you get to going so fast, and then all of a sudden you do something stupid. And you talk to guys that have really blown up their lives. And like, what happened? Like, I didn't see it coming. I don't know. It was just, things were crazy. It was busy. And all of a sudden, boom, my life exploded. And you're like, well, there's warning lights along the way. And just pay attention to those warning lights. And when those warning lights go off of like caution, be like, I need to talk to somebody. And I think that's really what has, the older I've gotten, the more my mistakes have been painful enough to learn from, the more I've intentionally sought out and maintained those kind of relationships.
And you and I have had some of those conversations too, because I asked, I was interested in, we're not just going to talk film. That's not life.
Right.
My angle is what's really going on, what is real life.
Yep.
And that's, especially as men, that's what we need to be to each other. And that's part of the iron sharpening iron. Is like, you got to get real. Sometimes you got to get raw. Yep. You got to get things off your chest. You got to be transparent and vulnerable. Yep. My first episode on this show was me being vulnerable. Wow. I can't help it. Yeah. It's just how I'm wired.
I love that about you.
So I'm gonna talk, and I'll get into some deep stuff, and I'll shed some tears, but I'm comforted by the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. So that gives me full authority to say it's okay to shed some tears sometimes. Passion projects coming up.
Got a lot of them. It's exciting. We've got several that are about to go into production. We're wrapping up the rest of the films for this year. We've got a project that goes in June that we're doing with Amazon called Sarah's Oil. It's a fantastic story that my buddy Cy is directing. I've got a couple of friends that are starring in it. So Zachary Levi is going to be back in that one. And then Sonequa Martin Green, her husband Kenrick. Man, these 2 individuals, I'm fired up about them. But she's the star of Star Trek Discovery. And she's a believer and has been looking for the right opportunity to explore expressing what she believes. And so Sarah's Oil is a period drama that takes place in Oklahoma about the first black millionaire in the history of the country. It's a little girl named Sarah that they found oil in her land, and her fighting to keep it as the community tried to take it away. It's a beautiful story. So that one goes in production in June. It's going to be great. And then I've got 3 that I'm developing to direct. One of those being Fearless, the Navy SEAL story that is a passion project that I'm chasing. So Jason Hall, that wrote American Sniper, is writing the script, and trying to get that one ready to go. And then I've got a short list of movie stars that I got to get one of them on board in order to get the budget that I need. So
you need to talk to him?
Yeah, I might. And so that one's exciting. And then I've got a sequel to a film that I'm really excited about that hopefully we're going to production in the fall, that not quite ready to announce, but it's going to be exciting. And that one's a passion project, and it's going to be huge.
Sweet.
It's going to be really cool. So, yeah, we got a bunch of stuff. And then we're also pitching a beloved best-selling novel that my buddy is directing that we're pitching around right now that we'll be announcing shortly. That's going to be earth-shattering when we announce the news, but not quite ready yet.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to this Navy SEAL story.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about it for a while.
Yep.
And I love anything that's war related. Being a veteran, it just connects me that much deeper to our veterans when I hear those stories and
Agreed.
I see them on film. So I'm excited for that. I want to thank you for your time, your insights, your story is greatly appreciated, and I'm glad we finally made this happen. And I appreciate you as a brother, and love your family, and continued success to you, sir.
Thanks, bud. I appreciate you, Thomas, and I'd love that your whole podcast being about intentionality forces me to slow down and be intentional today. So well done. You're doing something right, bud.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. God bless you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you guys for checking in. This has been Just Being Intentional with Thomas Harris. Please like, subscribe, follow, and we appreciate you. Thank you, and God bless.